Now we are on to example. And so, example is a specific instance of this that we have seen either in history or in literature or in movies. So, we should be able to find something pretty easily here in the example section. For me, what I was thinking of, I love Jane Austen, and one of her novels is called Emma. And I'm sure that because I have a class full of boys, except for you, Kendall, um, you probably don't know much about Jane Austen or Emma. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. So Emma is about this very rich and beautiful and smart young woman who basically has it all. And she lived alone with her father in this giant mansion in England. And because she's so wealthy and she's always kind of had everything come easy to her, she has a certain outlook on life where, she can afford to be very picky about the people she hangs out with. And she's a little bit pretentious, but she's not malignant by any means. So she ends up becoming friends with this very simple-minded, innocent girl named Harriet. And Harriet comes from, well, she is an orphan for all she knows. She doesn't know where her parents are, basically. And she's brought up in this girl's home. And Harriet is very unpretentious, and she most likely comes from a very poor background. And she is in love with this very simple farmer who loves her too. And, he's not rich by any means, but he's a very nice fellow and he loves Harriet, and Harriet loves him. Well, Emma becomes friends with Harriet, and she ends up taking Harriet under her wing. And so Harriet spends all this time with Emma at Emma's mansion, and she's beginning to think like Emma and thinking that, she deserves somebody more. She deserves a real gentleman. She's not going to be content with just a poor farmer boy. And so because Emma thinks this way, she deserves the best in life. She needs to be choosy about who she spends time with as far as like men go. Well, Harriet, who is not an absurdly rich heiress, starts to think that way too. And so Harriet ends up turning down the poor man that proposed to her. And basically, she ends up being absolutely miserable. But it took a long time for Harriet to undo all of the influence that Emma had on her, because they spent so much time together that Harriet, who was in no way, Harriet could not afford to be choosy. She couldn't afford to have the richest gentleman in England propose to her. She needed to realize her place. And so she, what they say, like beggars can't be choosers. And so what Harriet realized at the end was that she needed to look at the moral character of the man and not the outward appearance, or the wealth of the man. And so Harriet ends up learning her lesson at the end. And Emma also ends up learning her lesson, because she realizes she shouldn't have influenced her friend like that. Not everybody is going to have a Mr. Knightley come and make all of her dreams come true, which you probably don't get that reference. So anyway, so that's my example of how spending time with somebody can influence you. Maybe you guys can think of an example in some of the literature you've read in Omnibus. Perhaps something from Homer, where one person is influencing another person, and that person starts to take on the qualities of that other person. Can you think of anything? Can you think of anything in scripture or from a movie? I don't know. This one should be fun. I'm looking forward to reading what you guys come up with. on the example section. So the recognition part of this is pretty much going to be the same recognition that you put in all the other ones. So what is the truth of this saying? The reversal is going to be specific to your story or your example here. So what happens as a result of the friendship? And so it could be a good result or it could be a bad result. So the next section is the suffering. And so remember, suffering is what is somebody going to have to go through in order to follow this saying, or what is some aspect of it that could be a negative result of not following it. The agents, whatever you choose for your story. So for mine, it would be Emma and Harriet. The action, stop it, gosh. The action would be what's going on in this transfer of the qualities of one person to another. And so for mine, what's happening is that Harriet is getting too big for her britches. The time, mine would be in Regency, England. The place, England. Oh, why do I keep saying place for time? I'm totally conflating those two. The time for mine would be the early 1800s, and the place would be in Regency, England. The manner would be, how does your agent do that action, or how does that action take place upon your agent? So it could be something that for mine with Emma and Harriet, Emma actually designed to do this to Harriet. Emma actually plotted to change Harriet. She had good intentions. She thought that she was helping Harriet out, but she definitely was intentional about that. And so depending upon your story, it could be intentionally, like somebody could be meaning to change somebody else. It also could be like naturally, it could just be something like you're with somebody, whether you like it or not, you're going to be turning into that person in certain ways the more time you spend with them. And then the cause, why would this action take place? Or what's the reasoning behind it? Or it could be, why did your agent want to do that action? So in my case, why did Emma want to change Harriet? Well, because she thought that she was helping Harriet. She thought that she would make Harriet realize her own worth. So for the example paragraph, I want you to start it out with something like, let us consider Emma and Harriet, or let us consider blank and blank from whatever you're choosing as your story. And then you're just going to kind of go through these 9 narrative components just to tell the story, and make sure that you explain how it relates to our maxim.